Hello there. Welcome. My name is Benjamin Gadan. I'm the director of the Argentina Project here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars Latin American Program, and I greatly appreciate your participation. Before we start, I want to let everyone know that parts of this discussion will be conducted in Spanish. We have interpreters and we have equipment. Just please alert Catalina, my colleague here, if you need the headsets, and she will provide one. The criminal justice system in Argentina has been a somewhat haphazard affair for decades, known at times for its inefficiency and politicization. The institutional challenge is a great burden for Argentine society and its economy. It hurts the investment climate by failing to guarantee property rights and the enforcement of contracts, and it fosters a sense of impunity that has at times encouraged lawbreaking. Recently, a massive corruption scandal has drawn renewed attention to Argentina's difficulty in establishing the rule of law. As many of you have probably heard, the Argentine newspaper La Nación published the diary of a former government chauffeur, which chronicled alleged bribe paying by government contractors to senior officials, including Argentina's former president. In all these so-called notebooks, investigations have revealed more than $50 million in alleged bribes and implicated some of Argentina's most prominent business persons and political figures. The duration of the alleged misconduct and the prominence of the executives and political figures involved has made it hard to deny the existence of a culture of corruption and impunity in Argentina. But even before this scandal, President Mauricio Macri, elected in late 2015, had recognized the importance of criminal justice reform. In 2016, he launched the Justice 2020 initiative, promising bold reforms to improve judicial independence, transparency, and efficiency. We discussed that initiative with Argentina's Justice Minister last year here at an event at the Wilson Center. Today, Argentina is embarking on a new and ambitious effort to address the criminal justice system weaknesses, a rewriting of the penal code. The proposed reforms would address terrorism, drug trafficking, cyber crimes, corruption, as well as reproductive rights. They include proposed stricter penalties for certain crimes, including the production of illegal narcotics. We're thrilled to address this issue today with the Argentine federal judge, the Honorable Mariano Borinsky, who is leading this reform process in Argentina through broad public and professional consultations. Judge Borinsky is the chairman of the Commission for the National Criminal Code Reform, as well as an adjunct professor at the Universidad de Buenos Aires. He will shortly describe these proposed reforms, which he has helped develop, and then we will hear reactions and suggestions from our expert panelists, as well as regional and historical comparisons and context, and turn to you for your input as well. Before I turn to the judge, and even before that, we'll play a brief introductory video about this subject. I want to thank our partners in this event, including Exeger's Integrity Forum, Daniel Alonso, our colleague and friend, and the Inter-American Dialogue, which has loaned us our moderator for today, Michael Camilleri, who's the director of the Dialogue's Peter D. Bell Rule of Law program. After the video and the judge's remarks, Michael will introduce our expert panelists who will be helping to lead this discussion. Thank you again for joining us today for this important subject, both for the development of Argentine's criminal justice system and its economic recovery. Thank you again. We'll now play the video and then hear from Judge Borinsky.
buenos días. Muchas gracias por la presentación. Muchas gracias a Daniel Alonso por la invitación. Muchas gracias a la Embajada de Argentina aquí en Estados Unidos por toda la coordinación, la logística y también que me han tratado. Hoy es un día muy especial, lo saben bien aquí en Estados Unidos, una fecha importante y trascendente, 11 de septiembre. Nos une también con Argentina haber sido víctimas de ataques terroristas. Es importante, como piedra angular en esta discusión, que todos los delitos que afectan no solo a la Argentina en particular, sino al mundo global, estén incorporados a la legislación penal. En estos 100 años que ustedes han visto que tiene de vigencia el Código Penal, nunca el delito de terrorismo y el de financiamiento estuvieron incorporados al Código Penal. Estaban en casi 900 leyes especiales que fueron enmiendas al Código Penal. Hubo 17 comisiones anteriores que han trabajado y nunca el Código Penal pudo ser aprobado. Las urgencias siempre pudieron más que las cosas importantes. Por eso los gobiernos pasaron y el Código Penal nunca se aprobó. Evidentemente es el poder más fuerte que tiene el Estado, porque es el poder punitivo, el poder de disponer sobre la libertad, sobre la propiedad y sobre la vida de las personas. Por eso fue un gran halago, distinción y honor que el presidente de la Nación me haya designado presidente de esta comisión. Y se trabajó en las 24 provincias, yendo a reunirse con cada uno de los gobernadores para ver cuáles son las problemáticas locales, pero también teniendo en cuenta cuáles son las particularidades del mundo global, aquellas que son importantes para el OCDE, para el GAFI, para la OEA, para todos aquellos organismos internacionales que fijan determinado estándar, no solo en terrorismo, sino también en materia de corrupción, en materia de narcotráfico, en materia de lavado de dinero. El Código Penal entonces incorpora ese estándar internacional, pero también incorpora lo que señala la Constitución Nacional y lo que señalan los fallos de la Corte Suprema de Justicia de la Nación. Ustedes bien saben que Argentina forma parte del sistema europeo continental. A diferencia del sistema del common law aquí vigente, en el sistema europeo continental la principal fuente del derecho es la norma, es la ley. Luego viene lo que los jueces dicen o interpretan sobre esa ley. Por eso la importancia de fijar en normas concretas. Después de trabajar 1 año y medio, llegó el producto final, un nuevo Código Penal en la Argentina de 540 artículos aproximadamente. ¿No lo puede ir pasando? ¿Lo puede ir pasando usted? Ahí está. Yo le voy diciendo y usted va cantando. Entonces, uno de los puntos centrales es la incorporación de nuevos delitos al Código Penal, que atienda a esta modalidad global. El nuevo Código Penal incluye, como dijimos, terrorismo y financiamiento, narcotráfico, delitos fiscales. Para que se den una idea de la importancia que tiene que ver los delitos fiscales, lo evadido en la Argentina en la culminación de la última dictadura militar, estamos hablando finales de los 80, comienzos de los 90, llegó a la suma de 53.000 millones de dólares. Solamente en evasión fiscal de impuesto al valor agregado, impuesto a las ganancias e impuestos previsionales. Este número, 53.000 millones, es la deuda externa que dejó la última dictadura militar, que derivó en todos los problemas que tuvo Argentina, que eclosionaron en el año 2001. Vale decir, es fundamental que esta materia esté en materia penal y no en una ley especial. Delitos fiscales, delitos aduaneros, Argentina tiene 54 aduanas en toda su extensión y hoy hay un código aduanero, pero no hay una legislación penal incorporada. Delitos cambiarios. Hoy el dólar sube, baja, hay muchas maniobras que tienen que ver con el mercado de cambios, no está incorporado al Código Penal. Delitos militares, tráfico y permanencia ilegal de migrantes, delitos contra la libertad y dignidad del trabajo, tráfico de órganos, sangre y delitos genéticos. La manipulación genética por primera vez va a estar incorporada en la legislación penal. Delitos contra el medio ambiente. El país tiene muchísimos recursos naturales y deben ser protegidos. Delitos contra el patrimonio arqueológico y paleontológico. Delitos en el ámbito del deporte, otro de los capítulos que se incorporan al Código Penal. Estoy hablando de qué es lo nuevo, qué es lo que se está incorporando al Código Penal. Cuando hablamos de delitos en el deporte, tiene que ver con doping, pero también tiene que ver con fraude en el mundo del deporte y la violencia también que se genera en el ámbito de los espectáculos deportivos. Delitos informáticos. Delitos informáticos tienen distintas facetas. Los delitos que tienen que ver contra la integridad sexual, delitos que tienen que ver con menores, como puede ser delito de grooming, pero también lo que tiene que ver con la mera tenencia de pornografía infantil, que per se la tenencia va a pasar a ser un delito en el nuevo Código Penal. Asimismo, en el ámbito de los delitos informáticos, la captación de información, el phishing, delitos que tienen que ver con la apropiación de esa información, pero también con filtrarse y hackear los sistemas informáticos y hackear sistemas estatales incluidos. Delitos contra la propiedad intelectual, marcas, patentes, van a estar incorporadas en el nuevo Código Penal. Otra de las novedades que nos trae este nuevo Código Penal tiene que ver con delitos contra el orden internacional. Se crea un nuevo libro tercero. El Código Penal mantiene su estructura actual. Libro primero, libro segundo y libro tercero, delitos contra el orden internacional, que va a incluir genocidio, lesa humanidad, delito de desaparición forzada de personas, como delitos imprescriptibles, con normas propias de autoría y normas propias de juzgamiento, como es el principio de la justicia universal. En Argentina se están llevando a cabo distintos juicios de lesa humanidad. Toda la que tiene que ver con la criminalización de estas conductas están previstas en tratados internacionales incorporados a la Constitución argentina, pero no tienen tipificación específica en el Código Penal argentino porque no está previsto. A partir de ahora, con el nuevo código, va a haber un libro tercero que vincule con esta materia. Estas son, a grandes rasgos, las nuevas modalidades delictivas que se incorporan. Si podríamos señalar temas fundamentales de tratamiento, hablamos de narcotráfico, cuestiones de inseguridad. En Argentina, de inseguridad no les comenté, hay dos grandes puntos centrales que se llevan la mayor cantidad de vidas, que tiene que ver con el uso de armas de fuego y que tiene que ver con las tragedias viales en accidentes de tránsito. Se van a hacer modificaciones en esta materia, no solamente como delitos de resultado, sino también como meros delitos de peligro, por la aportación de armas y también como delitos de peligro por manejar alcoholizado, bajo los efectos de estupefacientes, en exceso de velocidad, haciendo picadas en esta última parte como delitos de peligro con sanciones de multa y de inhabilitación. Corrupción es otro de los grandes e importantes capítulos, responsabilidad penal de las personas jurídicas, terrorismo y financiamiento. El aborto también es otro de los temas que ha generado grandes debates y polémicas en la Argentina y que hacen entrar en juego los dos grandes derechos constitucionales, lo que tiene que ver de la persona por nacer, pero también de los derechos de la libre disposición del cuerpo de la mujer. En lo que tiene que ver con este último capítulo, se producen grandes innovaciones y modificaciones. Se tutela y se protege la violencia de género, como una norma general del Código Penal que habilita a que en aquellos casos en los cuales se verifique que hay violencia de género, sea violencia de género física, psíquica o incluso económica, como puede ser en un ocultamiento patrimonial fraudulento, en cualquiera de estas situaciones, el juez está habilitado y con la obligación de aplicar el tercio superior de la escala penal. Si se verifica en alguno de estos presupuestos, el juez aplica el tercio superior de la escala penal. A su vez, si se verifica violencia de género, no puede aplicar la probation, la suspensión del juicio a prueba. Es otra de las grandes novedades que trae el nuevo Código Penal. Se prevé la violencia obstétrica como otro de los nuevos delitos incorporados al Código Penal. En materia de narcotráfico, se incorpora al Código Penal, se legisla sobre las organizaciones internacionales dedicadas al narcotráfico, que era un aspecto que no estaba previsto en el Código Penal. Se señala, tal como lo ha marcado la Corte Suprema de Justicia de la Nación, que aquella tenencia de estupefacientes no va a ser punible si y solo si se verifica en escasa cantidad y en el ámbito exclusivo de privacidad, tal como lo señala el artículo 19 de la Constitución Nacional, que aquellas acciones privadas de los hombres que no ofendan ni el orden ni la moral pública ni perjudiquen derechos de terceros están exentas de la autoridad de los magistrados. Así va a estar previsto en el Código Penal, focalizándose en las organizaciones internacionales dedicadas al narcotráfico y señalando con distintas escalas punitivas los eslabones de la cadena del narcotráfico, como la elaboración, la producción, la comercialización de drogas, atendiendo al tipo de estupefacientes, como por ejemplo los casos agravados de drogas sintéticas, atendiendo a la particularidad de la intervención de menores, como son los casos de las fiestas electrónicas. Todas estas novedades van a ser incluidas en el nuevo Código Penal. En materia de inseguridad, se va a efectuar como una de las incorporaciones un seguimiento sociojudicial de aquellas personas acusadas de delitos graves, como por ejemplo delitos de homicidio o graves agresiones sexuales. El juez va a tener que hacer con posterioridad al cumplimiento de la pena hasta un lapso de 10 años de un seguimiento sociojudicial. Se valida el instituto de la reincidencia. Esto significa, no es lo mismo aquella persona primaria que aquella persona que ya fue condenada y que vuelve a cometer un delito. En este segundo caso debe cumplirse íntegramente la pena impuesta. Se busca, con el nuevo Código Penal, acortar los márgenes de discrecionalidad judicial, fijándole pautas claras al juzgador sobre cuáles son aquellas que eventualmente tendrán carácter agravante y atenuante, como por ejemplo en los casos de agravación, la intervención de menores, la intervención de armas, la actuación por odio o discriminación, o lo que señalé precedentemente de violencia de género, y en los casos de atenuación, por ejemplo, aquellas situaciones de colaborador eficaz o denominado arrepentido, como bien adelantaron en la presentación. Esto significa la posibilidad, bajo determinadas circunstancias concretas, de lograr un beneficio procesal para aquella persona que aporte información en casos de terrorismo, corrupción o narcotráfico o trata de personas, que aporten información tendiente a esclarecer los hechos, que aporten información tendiente a la devolución del dinero, es decir, lograr recuperar activos de dinero mal habido o de bienes en el marco de causas, o que puedan eventualmente determinar responsabilidad de autores o esclarecimiento de los hechos. También se incorpora la situación del cumplimiento en detención domiciliaria para aquellas penas inferiores a los 3 años, violencia de género, ya se lo señalé, tenencia y portación de arma de fuego, cuando son sin autorización, van a tener la fuerte sanción porque se verifica en la Argentina que constituyen el antecedente o la antesala de otros delitos contra la propiedad e incluso contra la vida. En materia de corrupción se incorpora, en primer término, La ampliación de la jurisdicción argentina. Se advierte que hay una matriz en lo que tiene que ver con esta problemática de la corrupción en los distintos países del continente y que muchas veces se tratan de delitos transnacionales. Es fundamental que se habilite la posibilidad del juzgamiento no solamente de aquellos hechos cometidos en la Argentina, sino también cuando, por ejemplo, el autor trasciende las fronteras o la víctima trasciende las fronteras, que el juez tenga los instrumentos necesarios para llegar a su juzgamiento. El decomiso es un tema que ha generado mucha controversia y que se está habilitando. No solamente el comiso definitivo en la conclusión del proceso penal, sino también desde el comienzo del proceso penal bajo determinadas circunstancias. Por ejemplo, la admisión de la procedencia ilícita de los bienes, o cuando exista peligro de fuga, o cuando exista peligro de prescripción de la acción penal, cuando se den alguna de estas situaciones en delitos graves, terrorismo, narcotráfico, corrupción, se habilitará el decomiso de los bienes desde el comienzo mismo del proceso penal sin la necesidad de tener que esperar hasta la condena definitiva. En los delitos de corrupción se aumentan las escalas penales. Tengan en cuenta que al incorporar nuevos delitos al Código Penal es necesario establecer una proporcionalidad en función de cuáles son los delitos más graves, menos graves, y en esa proporcionalidad la Comisión advirtió que los delitos de funcionarios públicos y los delitos de narcotráfico, las penas eran bajas y ameritaban la necesidad de aumentar ese marco punitivo. Aumento de las penas y también la incorporación no solamente de la sanción para las personas físicas que cometieron delitos, sino la importancia de responsabilizar a las personas jurídicas, a las empresas, a las sociedades que cometieron estos delitos. Advertimos que muchas veces las personas físicas cambian y las empresas y las corporaciones permanecen. Por eso la importancia no solamente de la sanción a la persona física, sino también a la persona jurídica, lo que se llama el sistema vicariante o de doble imputación penal. Es otra de las grandes e importantes novedades que se incorporan en la legislación. Terrorismo y financiamiento forma parte de los nuevos delitos que se incorporan. Asociación ilícita terrorista con sanciones de hasta 20 años de prisión, acogimiento, reclutamiento, adoctrinamiento y entrenamiento de terroristas, nuevas circunstancias agravantes, pero también la importancia no solamente de sancionar a aquella persona que comete estos actos, sino también a aquellas personas que las financian. El financiamiento va a estar incorporado dentro de un título nuevo que se incorpora al Código Penal con una pena y un delito autónomo. Una cosa es el acto en sí mismo y otra cosa es el de su financiamiento. Ambas conductas van a tener su debida tipificación, como así también la financiación de la proliferación de armas de destrucción masiva con penas de hasta 15 años de prisión. Lavado de dinero es otro de los puntos centrales que se mantienen tal las recomendaciones del GAFI en el Código Penal. La figura del lavado de dinero, que constituye un punto central, sobre todo en los delitos económicos, y la figura del autolavado, que muchas veces el lavado se convierte en un delito autónomo e independiente que también merece su debida tipificación. En materia de reformas, la figura del aborto, que ha generado controversia y discusiones en un debate parlamentario que se dio en una ley especial en la Argentina, el nuevo Código Penal busca amalgamar, emparejar ambos derechos constitucionales, los de la persona por nacer, pero también lo de los derechos constitucionales de las mujeres, y así es que se está buscando con este nuevo Código Penal una solución intermedia que trate de contemplar todos los intereses en juego. Es un tema que genera grandes y ásperos debates. Es imposible satisfacer las inquietudes de ambos polos opuestos, y es así que estamos buscando una solución componedora que incluya esta figura en el Código Penal, pero que establezca una serie de excepciones o justificaciones que tienen que ver con la no punibilidad. En primer lugar, la no punibilidad para la mujer. En segundo lugar, la excepción de responsabilidad en aquellos casos de abuso sexual, en aquellos casos de peligro para la vida de la mujer, pero también cuando existe peligro para la salud física o mental, tal como establece la Organización Mundial de la Salud, como un supuesto también de exención de responsabilidad. En definitiva, estamos tratando de buscar una solución que contemple casi 100 años de Código Penal que ha imposibilitado muchas veces que el Código se modifique justamente por esta cláusula que ha generado grandes debates. La comisión está integrada por 12 miembros, que somos jueces, fiscales, que somos actores del derecho penal y que vemos la problemática a diario en lo que sucede en cada una de las situaciones. Esta tarea la hemos asumido absolutamente en forma voluntaria y complementaria a nuestra función judicial y creemos que este código sintetiza los intereses fundamentales y más importantes de la sociedad. Lo que buscamos es justamente igualdad, eficiencia en el sistema de administración de justicia y transparencia. Por eso la comunicación con ustedes aquí. Estoy ampliamente a disposición para todas las preguntas que quieran luego efectuar. Muchísimas gracias por la atención.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Judge Borinsky. That was a very clear presentation of a very ambitious effort, and we applaud your capacity for synthesis and this effort. We know that the effort to reform Argentina's criminal code is one that provokes diverse opinions, and we're certainly grateful for your willingness to come here and present the thrust of the effort and your openness to comments from our experts and from our audience. So we're looking forward to jumping into that conversation. As Benjamin mentioned, I'm Michael Camilleri. I direct the Rule of Law program at the Inter-American Dialogue. We are extremely pleased to co-sponsor this event with the Woodrow Wilson Center and with Exeger. Benjamin, you've really elevated the conversation about Argentina in Washington. I think this event is a good example of that. As a complement to the judge's presentation, we have assembled a really terrific panel of three of the finest Argentina-born lawyers that we could find, all good friends as well. What we're going to do is I'll introduce them briefly, and then they'll have several minutes each to offer commentary on the new criminal code from the vantage point of their particular expertise. So you have their full bios on the sheets that were distributed, but I'll just briefly run through them. To my immediate left, Daniel Alonso is Managing Director and General Counsel at the global compliance firm Exeger, where he focuses on anti-corruption and anti-money laundering, corporate investigations, and independent monitorships, and is the founder and chair of Exeger's breakfast series, The Integrity Forum. In 18 years as a federal and New York State prosecutor, Alonso handled cases involving corruption in the public and private sectors, complex fraud, money laundering, and organized crime, among many others. Down at the end, Professor Claudia Martin is co-director of the Academy on Human Rights and Humanitarian Law and professorial lecturer in residence at American University's Washington College of Law. She also serves as a member of the Secretariat of GEQUAL, a campaign to promote gender parity representation in international courts and organs. At the Academy, Martin oversees the academic coordination of the LLM in International Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, the Summer Program of Advanced Studies in Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, and the Inter-American Moot Court Competition. And finally, Roberto de Michele is a principal specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank, focusing on modernization of the state. He has previously worked as the principal policy officer in the Office of Institutional Integrity at the IDB, and prior to that, he was, among other things, the Director of Policy Planning at the Anti-Corruption Office of Argentina, where he was also the specialist designated to the Committee of Experts of the Mechanism for Follow-Up on the Implementation of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. So, as I said, three of our very finest who bring a background in Argentine law and in the country itself, but also a really terrific comparative perspective from their work across the region and in Dan's case here in the United States as a prosecutor. So let me start with you, Dan. You have the floor, and look forward to your reactions and thoughts.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, thank you to the Wilson Center and to the Inter-American Dialogue. What I wanted to do is just give a few thoughts of what I saw in Judge Borinsky's project that was I think, really, really good, and then a few things that I would, in an ideal world, suggest to add. I do it from the perspective of an American lawyer. I'm not an Argentine lawyer. I don't even, unfortunately, have the sort of fluency with the existing Argentine penal code that I would like to have. So my remarks are based on the draft of the Commission's work, which is really a fine piece of thorough work. And it really is, for those of you who have a law background, or even if you don't, it's kind of what this project is like. What in the United States we would say would be a combination of the model penal code, which is the model by which a lot of states use to pass their laws, and the federal criminal code, which is what is used in our federal courts. So things like terrorist financing tend to be federal crimes in the United States. Things like homicide and rape tend to be state crimes. There are overlaps, of course, but here you have this all-in-one document which applies to the provinces. So it's really a Herculean effort that this commission undertook, and if it passes, it will affect every single aspect of the Argentine criminal justice system. So it's a huge, huge project. I think it's extremely thorough. I think it might even be, for my experience, almost too thorough. There were multiple definitions of crimes that were a little bit different each time, and I think this was done by a group of people who wanted to make sure that there were no loopholes. And I think that they succeeded. There are a lot of different ways to charge corruption, for example, under this project, under this bill. I won't steal Roberto's thunder by going too far into anti-corruption, even though I can talk about that all day. But let me just give you a few of what I think is like the really good, and then I'll give you some of my thoughts about what's missing. So really good is, I think the narco-trafficking chapter is really good because it does two things. It treats very seriously the high end. So there's a kingpin provision of this law. The judge talked about guidelines. This has some very good sentencing guidelines. There's a kingpin provision that the organizers of international narcotics trafficking are subject to very, very high additional penalties from 5 to 20 years, in addition to what is already the existing law for narcotics trafficking. This is a big deal because Argentina has, in recent years, unfortunately, been being introduced to the scourge of international narcotics trafficking that was well known in other parts of Latin America in previous decades. And so this is something which you kind of want to nip in the bud. So having a kingpin type or an organizer type law is very important. On the other side, you don't want to spend the resources of a criminal justice system locking up drug users and low-level drug dealers because you have an unlimited supply of those people, and you will pretty quickly fill up your jails and use up your resources. To what end, right? You always have to ask yourself, what is the societal good we are trying to accomplish here? And it seems to me with narcotics trafficking, we're trying to prevent violence. We're ultimately trying to prevent violence. The violence that comes with drug gangs killing each other, and the violence that comes with on the streets when drug addicts and people who are selling drugs are competing for territory or committing other crimes, whatever it is. So at the low end, this law has either a low punishment or a complete absolution. I couldn't really tell for people who are drug users, and I think that's very, very important. Judge, maybe you can clarify that. ¿Son absueltos completamente los usuarios o es una pena muy baja?
No será punible, es decir, lo absuelve cuando sea escasa cantidad y en el ámbito privado.
Yeah. Private use of small amounts. Excellent idea. We'll avoid going down the rabbit hole that we went down in a lot of our jurisdictions here. So I really like that, and I think it will have a good impact on the key goal here, which is the prevention of violence. I mentioned the sentencing guidelines that the judge mentioned. There's a long body of research and experience in the United States over our sentencing guidelines. Some people like them, some people don't like them. I come from the Justice Department perspective. I thought they were a good idea. I will say that whether you hate or love the U.S. sentencing guidelines, the idea of sentencing guidelines is a really good one. And it's a really good one for the rule of law as well, because the point of it is that you don't want to get a different sentence or a radically different sentence depending on which judge's courtroom you happen to walk into. And in a country like Argentina, where I've been told that the judges can be kind of uneven in different ways, you really don't want, you know, the whim of a particular judge to affect the rest of your life that much. So having guidelines to cabin discretion, to me, are a good thing. I think these are done responsibly, as if you read the project. It's not as detailed as the U.S. sentencing guidelines. There's just a few factors here and there to tell you whether you're supposed to go in the upper end of the range or the lower end of the range, and I think that's really, really a good idea. So I'm not going to talk about corruption generally, but I do want to say that the bribery sections in this law were drafted by people who really, really don't want corrupt public officials to get away with it. They're excellent, and I think they close almost every loophole I can think of, right? In bribery law, you want to make sure you grab the corrupt public officials, but you don't want to criminalize business as usual as the norms of a country allow, things that we might all agree, well, that shouldn't be a crime. So you want to get it right, and I think they got it right. And in particular, they were able to put in a provision of the law, which I and others have been trying to do in New York for a number of years, which is what I call the free money law, right? So bribery usually requires a quid pro quo. I give the public official something, she does something related to her public duties in exchange for that, right? So that's a little bit hard to prove. We prove it all the time, but it's, you know, you have to prove that connection. Free money is a great concept. That's when you give the public official money, not necessarily in exchange for something that they're doing, but just because of who they are. Here, Senator, here's $3,000. You use it however you want to use it. Right? Now, obviously, in people's minds, there's some corrupt motive there, but it's impossible to prove. So this closes what I call the free money loophole, which I've been urging the New York legislature to do for a while without success. So I think that that's excellent. That's all I'll say about bribery. I'll leave the rest to you. Asset forfeiture. This is a nearly perfect asset forfeiture law. You know, sentences and their effect on deterrence of crime, sometimes it's speculative, right? Is a criminal really thinking, oh boy, if I get 5 years or 8 years, should I commit this crime? But if you take their money away and their houses and their boats and their cash, that really hits them where it hurts. And so this law, this asset forfeiture law, is both for instrumentalities, meaning the cars and the boats that they use, and for ill-gotten gains, for proceeds. That's great. It allows for pre-conviction restraint of assets so they don't leave the jurisdiction, and it allows for substitute assets. If we can prove that you made X amount of money, but you've already dissipated it, we can substitute other assets. Those are the building blocks of an excellent asset forfeiture law. They're done within the criminal process in Argentina under this project. That's fine. In the U.S., it's both criminal and civil, but I think that can be a really very powerful law. A couple of other things, and then I'll pass it on to my colleagues. One very important law that you want, both to reduce insecurity in the streets and public corruption, is you want a good organized crime law, what in the U.S. we call RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. They don't have that in here, but they do have a pretty robust conspiracy law, which they call Asociación Ilícita. It requires 3 or more people to get together. In the U.S., it's 2 or more. You know, I'd rather it be 2, but I think that it's a pretty robust law. And I saw something fascinating. This law gives front and center treatment to the crime of seditious conspiracy. So that's a very interesting cultural difference between Argentina and the United States. In 9 years as a United States federal prosecutor, I never turned to the page where seditious conspiracy is listed. Last night I had to look it up to make sure we actually had that on the books. We do. You're not allowed to conspire to overthrow the government of the United States. I never used it. I never heard of anybody who used it. Argentina, which has coups in the living memory of everyone up here and people living in Argentina, has definitely needs a robust seditious conspiracy law. So I think that's a good idea. Gender violence is an aggravator. I heard the judge talk about that. That's excellent. That is very progressive and very helpful in the sentencing guidelines. If you commit a crime because of the gender of the victim, you get an aggravator. Finally, the last thing I want to touch on is, actually two things I want to touch on. Cooperating witnesses. Very, very important. They call this the ley del arrepentido in Argentina. It's great that they have it. They didn't used to have it. I would have gone further. This law limits the use of cooperators, or at least giving a benefit to cooperators. It limits it to certain crimes. Now, it's a pretty complete group of crimes, but it tends to be the more complex crimes. And that's fine, and that's when we need cooperators, but you also need cooperators sometimes in other cases. And I think that the fear of, oh my God, aren't they just making it up because they're getting a benefit? You know, there are lots of ways to meet that and to ensure the reliability and to have the finder of fact be able to tell whether they're telling the truth or not. Obviously, a lot of this is going on in the U.S. national debate right now. It's beyond the scope of this presentation. But I would say that limiting cooperators to certain cases is not what I would have done. I think it's got a nice comprehensive list, so I think it'll be very useful. I also see that the benefit that cooperators can get, the reduction in sentence, is not as large as I might want to see. It doesn't mean I want to give cooperators huge breaks all the time, but in the United States, the way it works is once you get that letter from the government saying, okay, this person cooperated and provided substantial assistance, then the judge has full discretion, can go anywhere from, say, the 20-year maximum of the crime all the way down to probation and anywhere in between. And we trust our judges to make the right call, and they generally do. Here, I worry that there's not enough incentive for cooperating witnesses to flip. Finally, financing of terrorism. This, as the judge said, is a new crime in Argentina, terrorist financing. Very important. It's been on the books in the United States for a long time, and it's excellent and very, very useful to do. The difference between the American law and the Argentine law is very significant. The new Argentine law requires knowledge that the money that you are giving to whomever is going to be used for purposes of terrorism or a terrorist act. That makes sense if you're just sort of writing it from scratch, but when you look at the way we're doing it in the United States, it makes even more sense. In the United States, it's not, there is a crime of giving money specifically to use in a terrorist act, but the better crime that federal prosecutors use much more often is giving money or a benefit to a designated foreign terrorist organization. So what the United States does is it has a list of organizations, say Hamas is on the list. And so what happens there is the check that's written by the terrorist benefactor usually goes to some front charity for Hamas or Hezbollah or whatever the terrorist organization is, and the key is to prove that the person knew that it was really going to the terrorist organization. If we had to additionally prove that they knew that Hezbollah was going to use it for a terrorist act, it would be very, very hard to convict those folks. And of course, Hezbollah will say, we do lots of great charitable work, and so therefore, people give us money, and it's not for terrorism. So I understand there may be some constitutional issues to do that in Argentina. I'm sure there are creative ways that you can go around it. I just point that out as a limitation of a law that just talks about giving money for terrorist acts. And I'll cede my time.
Terrific. Thanks, Dan. That was great. I'm under instructions to remind you that there is food and coffee available in the back. So for those who are itching for a second breakfast, it's there for the taking. Claudia, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Argentinian, but I have been asked to speak in English, so sorry for the accent. I want to thank the Wilson Center and the Inter-American Dialogue for the invitation. I have been asked to refer and to look into the draft code from the angle of international law and human rights, which is the area that I specialize in. As the video show and Judge Boriski mentioned, the current criminal code in Argentina was adopted almost 100 years ago. Since then, Argentina has ratified many international treaties, including human rights treaties, international criminal law treaties, and even terrorism treaties. All these treaties require that Argentina incorporates into the domestic law some of the crimes that are provided in the treaties, including some of the crimes that have been mentioned by Judge Boriski in his presentation. So each time that Argentina has the opportunity to update or adopt a new code, then it's a great opportunity to incorporate those requirements of international law that are binding upon Argentina and that we haven't had the opportunity to do so far. So I'm going to refer to a number of these provisions, international provisions that are needed to be incorporated and are reflected in the current draft. I'm also going to refer to those that are not, and finally make a comment on abortion. As Judge Boriski mentioned, the draft code now incorporates the crimes, international crimes specified in the Statute of Rome, including genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and even the crime of aggression, which I found that was very interesting. By comparing with the Statute of Rome, it appears to be that the code follows the requirements of this treaty. However, they have organized the typification of all crimes from a different angle, so it should be interesting to compare this more closely and see if, in fact, by redoing this typification, we are covering everything that is expected from the Statute of Rome. The draft code also incorporates a crime of forced disappearance. Of course, historically in Argentina, that's a very important and symbolic step. The crime of forced disappearances also seems to follow the definitions of the two conventions that have been ratified by Argentina, including the International Convention of Forced Disappearances and the Inter-American Convention. Interestingly, it aggravates the punishment whenever forced disappearance is part of a considered crime against humanity, but then when it lists the crimes that are contemplated under the crimes against humanity provision, it doesn't include forced disappearance. I think that even though it could be somewhat overlapping, I would say that as a human rights lawyer, I would like to see forced disappearances listed as one of the crimes within the provision against crimes against humanity. Another important incorporation into the code is the responsibility of commanders and other superiors. This is also taken from the Statute of Rome, given the history in Argentina during the dictatorship. I think that this is also a very important and symbolic provision. I think it also reflects the case law of the domestic courts that have been prosecuting crimes against humanity, including some of the cases that have been handled by Judge Boriski. Another important thing is concerning the crime of rape. This draft code, as the last one, or the current one, also considers rape as a crime against sexual integrity. It used to be considered a crime against honor, which meant that this crime would only be prosecuted if the victim decided to instigate the action. This was very problematic for the crimes of rape committed during the dictatorship because, as you know, most of the victims did not complain, or some of them were disappeared. So I guess that this is a very important step into protection of the right of women, and it also aggravates the punishment for when the crime is perpetrated by members of the police or other security forces. Again, rape was one of the crimes committed during the dictatorship, so I think this is very important and very symbolic as well. What does the draft code doesn't have, and I think it's very important. The draft code doesn't have a crime of torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Torture is punished while perpetrated in detention only, and only as part of the crimes listed as the crimes against personal liberty. The Convention Against Torture and the Inter-American Convention Against Torture that have been both ratified by Argentina have required that the states that are bound by the convention incorporate an independent crime on this matter. In addition, the Committee Against Torture has been very clear that this crime needs to follow the different specifications of the provision against torture. Another requirement of the committee has been that this crime should not be subject to a statute of limitation. And so this is not contemplated in the current draft. Again, I think it's very problematic, as we all know, or as I know, and some of the Argentinians who are here know, torture is perpetrated constantly in Argentina, and this would be a very important step to fight against the perpetration of this crime. There are two definitions in the code. They don't coincide. I agree with Dan that sometimes there seems to be too many definitions on the same crimes and, can create some confusions. The other important thing is that when the Civil Code of Argentina was adopted, it was a completely new code. It incorporated as the first provision a provision on sources and application. And that article stated from the beginning that all the cases that were being handled by the code would be decided under the applicable laws in light of the Constitution and the international human rights treaties that have been ratified by Argentina. The draft code, the draft criminal code that we are discussing here doesn't have a similar provision. And I think that that's problematic because it continues to further the idea that civil law and constitutional law are not necessarily related. So by including a provision that would require that the interpretations of the criminal code must be done in light of the Constitution and the international human rights treaties, then would ensure that all the limitations that are provided both constitutionally and by international human rights law are contemplated when the crimes are being applied to specific cases. Finally, I want to make a comment on the issue of abortion. Unfortunately, this draft code continues to criminalize abortion. It's true that it contemplates some of the exceptions that were provided in the current code and also in the case that have been developed by the case law of the Supreme Court, but they only apply to the doctor. And it doesn't apply for the woman who decides to self-inflict herself an abortion. And then it leaves to the discretion of the judge the possibility of reducing or not applying, suspending the punishment. As Judge Borinsky mentioned, this is a very controversial matter in Argentina, so leaving in the hands of the judge whether or not a woman should be punished for abortion is a very dangerous proposition. At the end, I want to say that for me, personally, the criminalization of abortion in Argentina, the decriminalization, I want to say, is a debt that all the democratic administrations in Argentina have with women and with the rights of women. I think that most of the Argentinians who are here, or those who know the country well, know very well that this is, that in this there is an unequal access, if you want to put it that way, to health and reproductive health. So criminalizing abortion, in fact, constitutes another form of discrimination for women, because as we all know, in practice, only those who don't have the means to have access to health and to sexual and reproductive health are in the end criminalized. So I know that it's very controversial, but I want to make the statement here that the administration that is submitting this code to consideration for Congress should make the symbolic decision to decriminalize abortion, and then let up to Congress to decide if they are going to take it or reject it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. Roberto.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Exeter, the Wilson Center, and the Dialogue for organizing this discussion. Thank you, Judge Borinsky, for sharing your presentation, and congratulations on a really very, very important effort. Long due, I guess. I have 4 comments, and I'm going to take advantage of being at the bank and the perspective we have of working on this issue in 26 countries around the region. We are actually now in the process of evaluating the efforts of the bank with its member countries in the past 20 years in legal and judicial reform. And interesting, and that brings to my first comment. It's not a very nice picture, and this is a bit of a self-criticism as a development agency. And but it's a very interesting learning process. Why do all these efforts, or most of these efforts, don't achieve the results that are expected? And some of this is at the beginning of your presentation. Let me give you 1 or 2 thoughts of why we think this sometimes gets derailed or doesn't achieve desired results. One problem appears to be sort of reasonably covered. I think Daniela and Claudia did an excellent job at pointing, all the improvements in terms of of legislating, of providing, sound, reasonable drafting of a law, which is very important. You can't get away with discretion. There's always going to be interpretation of the law. But I think overall there are improvements. I agree with the other panelists. There are still areas that perhaps you want to cover and you need to improve coverage. And some of those discussions are not only technical, but also political. And one of the things that we've noticed in our experience that when there's a reform like this one, you also need a discussion about how to implement. What happens the next day in case this reform gets approved? And you start getting questions that our fellow economists at the bank ask, who's measuring performance? Are you sure you have the institutional design that is going to be able to apply these regulations? Do you have the means and the resources to conduct complex investigations into financial crimes or into terrorist financing? Do you have the information or the resources to account for some crimes that specific groups in society suffer? So, for example, women or people who are disadvantaged. Where does that data come from? And in our experience, we find that most countries in our region do not have that information that helps you with the criminal policy implementation. And the criminal code is perhaps the most important piece in criminal policy that we have. So that's one first comment is what are your thoughts on how to complement that? The other one is related to something that Claudia and I were discussing off the record. When did you graduate? And when I graduated, much earlier than Claudia, you went to international law class, and basically it was boring, short, and there were a couple of things that we didn't have FATF or Gafi. We didn't have the UN Convention. We didn't have the OAS Convention Against Corruption. We did not have most of the treaties and conventions that you mentioned that are now part of the, we didn't have most of the human rights treaties. They were not there. So there's a new generation of people that are now using this international legal instrument as part of their daily work. I see this as a very positive trend. And my question is, I was wondering, what's happening in law schools? Are people being taught to think globally, not only locally, about the rules that they need to apply? Do they understand that many of the crimes that they will be investigating or judging or prosecuting or defending are now international in nature? That they not only occur in our own jurisdiction, but have international ramifications. And that include not only things that people do, but very complex corporate structures, financing, and many other elements that go beyond criminal law, that involve civil law, involve corporate law, involve other areas of the law that need to be taken into account. So my other comment is, how do you think your code is going to integrate to the broader spectrum of local and international law? One last comment. It refers to, in reading the project, I saw that many or several of the amendments and reforms are under the idea that there's a requirement or there's a need to have an increment in sanctions, so heavier penalties. I'm not sure if more is better always. Sometimes, for some crimes, it's actually the opposite. Less is better, working more on prevention, making sure that people get a second chance. This is something that, for example, particularly affects women in certain crimes because of the role of women in society. A recent study at the IDB showed that investments in preventing reincidence of women pay off, I think, on a 1 to 6 scale for every dollar you invest. So maybe a thought about that from you would be interesting. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Roberto. So I think with the time we have left, what I'd first like to do is maybe go back to the judge for some quick responses, and I'll abuse the microphone to maybe add a question of my own to those that Roberto posed, and then we'll leave time, obviously, for questions from the audience. But my question is maybe a little broader and perhaps a little more provocative, which is that the critique that you often hear of Argentine justice is less to do with kind of technical capacity and more to do with independence. there is an impression that there is sort of an excessive coziness between the government in power, between the federal justice system, and in some cases the intelligence services. And so my question is, to what extent do you see this reform effort as being responsive to those concerns and strengthening the independence of the justice system? And to what extent are additional separate measures necessary to get at the kind of structural politicization and lack of independence that we've seen in some cases leading to impunity for those in power and prosecutions against those who are out of favor? So would welcome your thoughts on that.
Bien, en primer término, agradecer a todos los colegas del panel, al doctor Alonso, a la doctora Martín y al doctor Michele y al coordinador por su pregunta. Quiero agradecer el tiempo que se han tomado para leer el contenido y quiero hacer un agradecimiento muy especial por los elogios que han efectuado al trabajo efectuado. Voy a dedicar algún tiempo a algunos comentarios puntuales que han hecho, algunas críticas que la verdad que son muy productivas y útiles. Voy primero con Claudia Martín. En lo que tiene que ver, tal vez no le haya llegado la última versión porque se estuvieron haciendo ajustes de último momento y se incorporó específicamente en el capítulo de los delitos contra la comunidad internacional, dentro de los delitos de lesa humanidad, el delito de tortura, específicamente con el carácter de imprescriptibilidad, con las características de autoría. El ajuste de último momento, de algunos retoques que se estuvieron haciendo, tal vez no habilitó a que llegue la versión final a sus manos, pero está incorporado específicamente el delito de tortura como delito de lesa humanidad imprescriptible. El otro punto, el tema del aborto. Hay una objeción constitucional a tratar la legalización en la Argentina durante este año y es la siguiente. Al haber sido desaprobado por el Senado de la Nación, el artículo 81 de la Constitución impide tratar exactamente el mismo tema tal como fue vetado por el Congreso de la Nación. Ustedes saben que fue aprobado en diputados. Diputados representa la masa de gente, la cantidad proporcional de personas. Senadores representa la opinión de las provincias y ahí tiene exactamente el mismo peso la opinión de una provincia grande que de una provincia chica. Y ahí jugó fuerte las provincias del norte del país que son básicamente antiabortistas. Por ese motivo es que primó esa voluntad en el Congreso y fue desaprobado. Por ese motivo es que la legalización no puede ser tratado. Si no incorporamos una situación en el código que prevea no la legalización porque está vetado constitucionalmente, sino una situación que prevea la incorporación al código con excepciones, directamente el Código Penal no puede ser tratado en el Congreso de la Nación porque tampoco se puede enviar un Código Penal sin un artículo, no se puede mandar el código sin el artículo 86. Ese es el motivo que se ha llegado a esta solución intermedia, pero desde ya puede ser motivo de ajustes y de incorporaciones. Y desde el punto de vista político, yo estoy de acuerdo absolutamente con lo que dice la colega del panel, en lo ideológico, en lo personal, pero acá debe primar lo pragmático y lo posible. Y por ahora esto que incorporamos es lo posible, no es lo que yo personalmente puedo llegar a pensar, que estoy de acuerdo con lo que usted piensa y con lo que piensan la mayoría de los que están aquí presentes, sino un código posible. En lo que tiene que ver con el comentario muy importante que me hizo el colega, el doctor Roberto Michele. El día lunes, ahora la semana que viene, empiezo a dictar un seminario en la Universidad de Buenos Aires sobre el nuevo Código Penal argentino. En el ámbito nacional, la intención del presidente Macri es la aprobación del presupuesto nacional, que es fundamental para lograr el déficit cero, para lograr el puente con el Fondo Monetario Internacional, y tras ese tema va el Código Penal. Pero ya empezamos a trabajar en las universidades, ya estuvimos trabajando en las asociaciones de abogados y adelanto, el Código Penal mantiene su estructura, es decir, el delito de homicidio sigue siendo el 79 del Código Penal, mantiene la estructura para facilitarle también la actividad a los actores del derecho y lo nuevo se incorpora justamente luego de lo que ya está en el Código Penal. La idea es comunicar en universidades, en asociaciones de abogados, en ONG, es decir, tener una comunicación permanente previa a la aprobación para que cuando el código esté presentado ya tenga la capacidad, la capacitación y la comunicación suficiente para poder su aplicación práctica. En lo que tiene que ver con el aumento de las penas, que bien señala, no se aumentan las penas en todo el Código Penal. Se aumenta, creo haber señalado, en un sector específico que tiene que ver con los delitos de funcionarios públicos, de narcotráfico, delitos económicos. Uno de los principios del Código es la igualdad. Hoy en día el Código Penal está dirigido hacia los que menos tienen. Está dirigido hacia los delitos contra la propiedad, hacia las mulas que transportan estupefacientes. Las cárceles argentinas están llenas de personas que cometieron estos delitos. El Código apunta a una igualdad ante la ley del universo total de delitos que se cometen en una sociedad. Por eso es que en lo que tiene que ver con el aumento de las penas está focalizado a corrupción y narcotráfico. En lo demás, hace una aplicación efectiva de la ley penal. Nada más que eso. Otro de los puntos que tiene que ver con el comentario que hizo el coordinador sobre la independencia del Poder Judicial, la justicia necesita herramientas, concretamente un código penal que defina los delitos y las penas con claridad conforme el estándar de los intereses de la sociedad actual. Necesita un código procesal que ya está aprobado. En ese código procesal se acortan los plazos, se acortan los tiempos y se traslada hacia el fiscal quien debe investigar y recolectar las pruebas. Se va a lograr un equilibrio en esa independencia, siendo que el juez no tenga el poder total del proceso con la recolección y la toma de decisiones, sino que la recolección de prueba quede en cabeza del fiscal con el código procesal que ya está aprobado y está próximo a su implementación. En tercer lugar, además del Código Penal y Código Procesal, desde ya que es necesario que el Consejo de la Magistratura de la Nación, previsto por la Constitución, cumpla con su misión de la designación de los magistrados. Se pasó el año pasado al actual de un 30% de vacancia a un prácticamente 10% de vacancia. Es una tarea conjunta de todos los poderes del Estado. Para designar un magistrado debe pasar también por el Senado de la Nación. Es necesario una actividad conjunta de todos los poderes del Estado para lograr esa independencia, tener un código penal, un código procesal y un Consejo de la Magistratura eficiente en la designación de los magistrados.
Excellent. We have some time left for questions, so I think we'll take a few at a time. I believe there are microphones, perhaps, right in the back, so please just introduce yourself and yeah, we'll start in the back.
Good morning, Brenda Heffron from Exeter. Daniel, thank you for the panel and for experts. One of the areas that's really difficult in corruption is detecting bribery. And some of the areas that we found success in the United States was the use of deferred prosecution agreements. If I understand the provisions, there is a criminal corporate liability piece here. But is there a provision for deferred prosecution agreements to encourage companies to self-report? In my experience, working corruption cases, we would have never known about these crimes. The company had not come forward knowing that there were going to be programs in place to encourage their cooperation, provide evidence, and then get some sort of leniency in that sentencing. My second point is the forfeiture. Again, you also mentioned how important this is. And you will have tremendous success with this. My question to you is, once that money starts coming in, there'll be lots of people looking to grab some of that pie. It's important, obviously, to take care of people like victims of crime. But also, no one has unlimited resources, even in the United States, in places like Argentina. Are there provisions that the groups doing the investigations and the prosecutions are able to access those forfeiture funds to continue the investigation? Thank you.
Sure, let's take another question right here in the front.
You want an answer to that one?
Let's take a few and then
¿Te
we'll come
parece
back
que
to that.
hacemos uno y contestamos?
¿Por qué no
o pref-
tomamos dos o tres y luego
Mucho
volvemos
gusto,
con el,
¿cómo no?
con el panel, si les parece?
Good morning. I'm Jocelyn Nieva, Senior Legal Advisor for Latin America and the Caribbean with the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. Thank you very much for this panel. My question follows on a comment that several of the panelists have mentioned, that there are multiple definitions in the penal code for different crimes. And in the context of financing of terrorism, we have an extra complication because from the coverage in the press that I've read, there is simultaneous new legislation on financing of terrorism. And so, first of all, is it possible to obtain both drafts? Because we'd like to read the law and these draft laws and see what they say. But secondly, there's concerns that in Argentina, the Gafi standards are not met with regard to not-for-profit organizations. Recommendation 8. Gafi standards say that each state must do an assessment of risk for the NPO sector and apply targeted risk-based measures. From what I've heard in this presentation and what I've read in the coverage, there's a real concern that that this lack of clarity will continue to lead to disproportionate negative impacts on the not-for-profit sector at a time when the not-for-profit sector is really needed in Argentina to deal with the current problems. So, and this lack of clarity in the norms is leading to aversion of risk, bank de-risking, that is again impacting the ability of the not-for-profit sector to act. So would you speak to how you've attempted to deal with this problem, and is there a way to see both drafts of both of these laws with regard to financing of terrorism? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take one more. Right here.
Hi, my name is Siriana Santa Cruz. I'm a Spanish teacher at the School for Ethics and Global Leadership, a local high school. And just to follow up on a question raised during the discussion of the panelists, I was curious to know a little bit more about implementation. How will you measure success and ensure consistency throughout the country based on your proposed changes to the criminal justice system? Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks for the question. So maybe, Judge, we can start with you, and then we'll allow our other panelists to comment on these questions.
Bien, vamos a la primera pregunta, que se desdoblaba en dos. Una parte que tenía que ver con los sobornos y el colaborador eficaz, y otra parte que tenía que ver con el decomiso y con el destino de los fondos. ¿Sí? Vamos a la primera pregunta. Tengamos en cuenta, vamos a la de colaborador eficaz. Es un instrumento útil para este tipo de delincuencia, se está aplicando actualmente en la Argentina, y la idea es con el nuevo Código Penal mejorar esa versión y establecer algunas precisiones. Pero tengamos en cuenta que el imputado o acusado en un proceso penal es un sujeto de derechos. Y cuando se convierte en un objeto de prueba, esta prueba debe ser complementada con otros elementos más, no debe ser la única. Si esa prueba es la única y exclusiva, ese proceso difícilmente llegue a buen puerto. Por eso tengamos en cuenta que en lo que tiene que ver con la aplicación de este instituto excepcional, cabe estar en un equilibrio entre la eficiencia en la administración de justicia y las garantías. Es un instrumento útil para combatir el crimen organizado y este tipo de delincuencias, pero debe ser complementada con investigación, con otras evidencias y con pruebas que debe recolectar el fiscal y el juez en el marco del proceso penal. Con estas salvedades es un instrumento valioso, pero con estas salvedades. En lo que tiene que ver con establece cuál es el destino de esos fondos, cuál es el camino que debe seguir, que desde ya que no es un destino propio para el Poder Judicial, ni para el juez, ni para el fiscal que lo investiga. Los fondos van a ser para cumplir las funciones esenciales del Estado: educación, salud, seguridad y justicia, las 4 funciones esenciales, ¿sí? Va a haber un camino específico de destino que va a estar específicamente reglamentado. Tengamos en cuenta que la víctima en el nuevo Código Penal va a ganar en protagonismo y en espacio. Tiene un espacio que antes no tenía. Es otra de las importantes modificaciones que no había tenido tiempo de comentar, pero es otra de las grandes modificaciones del nuevo Código Penal. En lo que tiene que ver con la siguiente pregunta de terrorismo y lo que señala también del GAFI. El Código Penal es cortito y escueto, así como lo pueden ver, con 540 normas que intentamos que sean bien claras, precisamente porque lo único que hace es definir prohibiciones y penas. Algunos aspectos que usted estaba señalando que tienen que ver con alguna de las 44 recomendaciones que hace el GAFI, como prevención, por ejemplo, exceden el marco específico de lo que es la definición de un código penal. El Código Penal se limita a establecer la prohibición y su sanción. Y desde ya que no va a ser autosuficiente para lograr el fin que usted estaba señalando y que esas cuestiones forman parte de las políticas de Estado y de los acuerdos de cooperación y de prevención en la materia de la criminalidad económica que debe generarse entre los Estados. Pero tampoco lo vamos a minimizar. Es la piedra basal que genera esa situación de acuerdos posteriores. La piedra basal es la definición con claridad de cuál es el alcance de lo que está prohibido y permitido en una sociedad. En materia de terrorismo y financiamiento, una pregunta que hizo usted que también estaba vinculada con un comentario que hizo Daniel Alonso sobre dificultades que desde ya se generan por marcos que están bordeando objeciones constitucionales, desde ya que son delitos novedosos, que no estaban previstos, que responden al mundo global y que por lo tanto se incorporan con muchísimo cuidado y cautela, sujeto a las evaluaciones posteriores que se hagan en los casos concretos. Estamos ensayando con el Código Penal en función de lo que el mundo global manda y que los intereses de la sociedad mandan. Puede ser sujeto a críticas y puede ser sujeto a análisis constitucionales que han generado controversia. Veremos cómo evoluciona, pero lo que hacemos en el Código Penal en este punto es una escueta tipificación y previsión de lo que está prohibido, permitido y cuál es su consecuencia. Algunos de estos aspectos, me parece que usted señala, exceden ese marco de actuación. El objetivo es esa clara definición, cumpliendo desde ya con una de esas 44 recomendaciones en el caso concreto del GAFI y en el caso concreto de la responsabilidad de las personas jurídicas y otras cuestiones más, respondiendo al estándar del OCDE. En cuanto a cómo medir concretamente los resultados, es difícil. El derecho penal no es un derecho reparador. Es muy difícil establecer el éxito de un código penal en función de tener más o menos condenas. No es un resultado positivo para la sociedad tener más condenas. El objetivo es que ese tipo de delitos no se cometa en lo sucesivo y es difícil establecer una vinculación directa entre establecer una norma en el Código Penal y su consecuencia inmediata y directa a la sociedad. Es una ayuda que va a ser complementada con otros factores, pero es muy difícil a partir del derecho penal y de establecer definiciones prohibidas, decir o cómo medir un resultado. Desde ya que, por ejemplo, el resultado favorable será que las personas que se encuentren detenidas, hoy en la Argentina llegan a un número aproximado de 80.000 personas en el servicio penitenciario. Un resultado favorable sería que las personas detenidas no sean como actualmente sucede, que tienen un 50% con personas procesadas sin condena. Un resultado favorable sería que las personas que estén detenidas sean por condena. Ese podría ser un resultado favorable. O un resultado favorable podría ser que las personas detenidas no sean siempre de bajos recursos económicos. Ese podría ser otro, eventualmente, hipotéticamente, forma de medir una aplicación de igualdad ante la ley a partir del nuevo Código Penal. Y muchas gracias por las preguntas.
Terrific. Let me turn to Dan.
So I wanted to address the question about corporate criminal liability, because that's a very exciting area in Argentina right now. And Ren, thank you for the question. My colleague Ren McEachern was the FBI's squad supervisor here in Washington for the FCPA squad. So he's a foreign corruption expert. And the question is very, very timely, because there already is a corporate criminal liability law that was enacted last year, Law 27401, and that's incorporated into this this draft code. So the issue is that you can get a deferred prosecution agreement under this, but it's not what you're used to. So it's called an effective cooperation agreement, and it seems to require a court case, which would be not what companies that you're used to would want. But there's something probably even better, is that there's an absolute defense. You're exempted from punishment if you self-disclose and have an adequate integrity program, a compliance program, and give up your ill-gotten gains. So if you do all that, there is a complete exemption from punishment. So there is some incentive. I will say that given Argentina's perception of the current justice system and how likely it is that the corporation is going to get convicted under this, I think that that's less of an incentive than something very smart that the government did a few months ago, which is that they required a compliance program under this law if you want to be a government contractor. So I think that the country's slowly going to start changing and having policies and procedures that will encourage self-disclosure and cooperation and all that good stuff. But it won't be because they're worried about getting convicted in court like they are here. I think it'll be more, at least in the short term, because they want to continue doing business with the government. Hopefully in the long term, with this penal law reform and with the criminal procedure reform, which is on the table as well, which hopefully will enter into effect next year, it will be a system that will approximate the kind of stuff you're used to, with an accusatorial system, a speedier trial system, a real serious threat of conviction, which doesn't really exist right now, or at least not speedy conviction. So, great question, though.
Going to your point about de-risking, and yes, you're right. Argentina does not have at this moment a national risk assessment in compliance with Standard 1 of the 40 FATF recommendations, but they're in the process of getting there. Actually, they requested the IDB to help them. We have conducted national risk assessments in 10 countries in the region, and you're absolutely right. The nonprofit sector is both one of the sectors that is, more lightly regulated and supervised in most of our countries. Argentina probably not the exception, and it's one of the sectors that has probably a higher risk of being misused for the improper reasons. By the way, I come from the nonprofit sector. I was president of TI chapter in Argentina, so I feel your question very directly. Now, will an AML risk assessment solve this problem? Maybe. It's going to at least give you some information of what's the magnitude of that risk. But it needs to be complemented by proper regulation and supervision, exactly to, I think, go in the direction that you're pointing, making sure that the people who are using these legal vehicles are duly protected from those who are not. The problem is, as long as you don't know, you cannot regulate and supervise properly. Argentina did start a year and a half ago an exercise in trying to determine terrorist financing risks. And that's about to be completed. So, hope that helps.
I want to make a clarification to my presentation regarding torture. It's true that torture is included among the list of crimes in the provision on crimes against humanity, but there is no provision on the crime of torture itself. And that's a requirement of the convention, international conventions. They all require that you have an individualized crime. Now it is included, the punishment is including within the crimes against personal liberty. So you need to have an individual crimes, and that crime has to be also not subject to the statute of limitation. That was the reason that I indicated that this is completely lacking in the current project. Thank you.
Terrific. So we've come to the end of our time. Judge Borinsky, thank you so much for being here. This is clearly a gargantuan effort that you've taken on, and we're very grateful for your openness to the feedback from our experts, from our audience. We hope that it's helpful as you go forward. We know you have an important process of consultation with Argentine civil society and eventually a debate in Congress, so hopefully this input will be useful as you go forward, and we stand ready to support as we go on. I want to thank our three experts for taking the time to be here, for taking the time to study the code and provide such valuable input based on their areas of expertise. And finally, I want to thank, again, our sponsors, the Wilson Center and Exeter, and all of you for being here today. Please join me in thanking our panel.